Welcome to the Blue Mind Approach, a platform to drive human consciousness and personal development. We interview inspiring people, storytellers, authors, coaches, athletes, and business founders to share their stories to help you reprogram yourself and drive higher performance. Welcome to Blue Mind. Hello, it's Ed here. Welcome to the Blue Mind podcast. And today I've got Andy Stone with me, a dear friend of mine from Staffordshire. And we're going to be talking about latex and triathlons and all things related to that. But Andy, nice to see you.
Lovely to be here, mate. Thank you for having me.
I think it was lycra, not latex. I don't know where that was.
You do you, mate. 2022. You do you.
It is what it is. So Andy, just great to see you on it. I know we had a go at it last week and it was a complete fail trying to do it in Euston Station. Maybe you can just introduce yourself, where you live, and maybe how we met. That might be a good start.
Yeah, sure. Andy Stone, 41. Born and bred in Stafford, sunny Stafford. We met. I was kind of a little bit in between when we met. I'd not long been out of divorce. I was kind of coming out the other side of that, really, and was desperate for a changing career. The reason for the breakdown of my marriage was because I'm an alcoholic, and I just kind of got to the point where the wheels were really starting to fall off in a big way in my life. And
so chronologically, this is back in 2018, 19, was it? I think.
Yeah.
Maybe for viewers, maybe some of context. Andy has just done a lot of triathlons this year, which has got a lot of local and national press. And a lot of the causation for that was not only personal challenge, I think, but also to raise awareness for your addictive qualities, which I'll call them. So maybe rewinding from that, let's go right back to you as a single man, or maybe not single man, in your previous life before you woke up to the new you, should we say?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was just super happy in my marriage. She was my best mate. We were.
When did you get married? What age?
I would have been 25. So it was 2000. Hang on.
The details aren't that important, but roughly.
No, but yeah, so I was 25 when we got married. Life was great. We'd been backpacking a few times. We were absolute best mates, and we were the ones that were going to be the old couple on the pier, you know. And unfortunately for me, alcohol kind of got in the way. Drug use, primarily cocaine by that time.
You worked in restaurants, didn't you, Andy?
Yeah, so I was in kitchens. I was a chef for years, and the thing about hospitality is it's a blessing that you can leave one job at lunchtime and be in another job by the afternoon, you know. And I just went from job to job to job to job, just constantly looking for a new start, looking for a kitchen without the same problems. And unfortunately, what I came to realize in recovery was that the problems were all in my own head. And obviously, everywhere I went, I took them with me. And so the whole victim mindset had really kind of taken hold by late 20s, early 30s. And I was unable to shake it, just constantly in a state of sort of cortisol and running through my brain, adrenaline, and unable to settle. And the only thing that helped at the time was drinking. So it really...
So you've subsequently been diagnosed with a number of let's call them mental health challenges. Do you think you can talk about those, obviously, were they related, do you think, to this kind of erratic behavior and the addiction?
I think they definitely go hand in hand. I think there's definite grey area with poor mental health and addiction. I am hopefully going to be going on to study it all through various courses, but it's something that absolutely fascinates me at the moment as to why I had ADHD and dyslexia. I had those diagnoses at high school.
Right.
And I'd kind of seen 9 mental health people, doctors, counsellors, various individuals, and hadn't really got anywhere with any of it. Hypnotherapy, CBT, I'd gone on SSRIs, Ritalin, Valium, and was just on a bit of a cocktail of prescribed medication. Fortunately, nothing ever really got out of hand in that area. I have got good friends that have seen the messy end of meds, but for me, it was always booze. That was kind of always my go-to. And it did.
So you were drinking and taking drugs whilst you were on medication.
Yes, that's how messy it got. I was just that desperate. But then my philosophy was I was just a guy who was having a bad time, and you drink if you had my problems, and all that kind of cliche thinking.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't until I went to residential rehab that I was able to see the other side and flip it and say, well, I've only got those problems because I'm drinking. I had a minimum wage attitude, and
yeah,
it was all just a bit of a.
Well, was it like life is tough, woe is me? Your mindset is I'm never going to be much. I'm a victim of the system. No one's helping me. Poor old Andy. But you were married at this time, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And no one was going to come and save me. And I thought they were, or if you weren't, bollocks to you, get pissed. That was kind of the mindset. And
can I ask, you don't have to answer this, subsequently, since you've got clean, and talk about that in a minute, I want to know obviously what triggered you to get clean, but looking back at that period of your life, were you aware of what you were? What happened for you to start changing that? And obviously your marriage suffered and relationships suffered. And just talk about that period of the descent, the dissension into hell, and then coming out of it. What were the triggers, if you don't mind trying to explore that catalyst to go down and the catalyst to go up?
Yeah, I think to really wind the clock back, I think because I had a difficult school life, so I'd any kind of sugar. My mum and dad were very, very switched on to all of this, and mum and dad were great. Sugar, preservatives, D numbers, colorings, flavorings, all of that. I used to be hyper and out of control. I think mum and dad really struggled with me when I was young. They just screamed to put me into sport, swimming, rugby, judo, cricket, you name it, just wear me out. But as soon as I was able to then get to high school age and get down to the shops at lunchtime and eat a 10p mix and then go and sit in a 2-hour maths lesson, it was just never going to happen. So the comp moved me on. The grammar school then did the same. And so I almost think now, after a lot of reflection, that the flighty, disposable mindset was implanted in me at quite a young age. And because I changed schools, okay, it was only across the town of Stafford geographically, but I lost contact with all my schoolmates twice. And then I actually ended up socializing with my brother's lot in the end because I didn't really mates at that point. And again, that's just another kind of string to the disposable, flighty mindset. And with, as I've mentioned, hospitality being how it is, I was just constantly moving from job to job. And so I never set, and I never really put roots down apart from with my wife. And she was very stable. Her family don't drink. And so the comparison to me to her was a very unhealthy, because of how successful she was being. My brother's got his degree, got his chartership. He was doing well in the city of London. My mate, mortgages, kids, settled, promotions. And I was just constantly comparing myself to my peers. And I think that had a detrimental effect on me. And I hadn't realized quite how badly it had. And I think...
So did you feel you were being left behind, and the more you stayed in this rut of job hopping, the more you were just trying to, the having, like, getting out of your mind, right, and taking drugs and being in that chef environment and going through like the Thursday, Friday, Saturday cycle of, and that's not beer, obviously, I know that. But, people might recognize this from their own lives. They work all week, Monday to Friday, and then they get to Thursday, Friday, they're drinking, and then they hit it hard Thursday, Friday, Saturday, lunch on Sunday. And don't forget, a lot of people are living in that cycle
of substance abuse, and it's disguised as being normalized, but it's not. Of course, it's people escaping their lives. It's fun. Everyone's having fun. And I used to drink when I was married. We would drink. I would drink at work, after work on a Wednesday and Thursday, then drink Friday and Saturday, Sunday lunch. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that cycle, and they excuse it as it's like, I'm having fun, I'm entitled to work hard, play hard. And then with you, it sounds like you went completely over the top with it, to the point where it wasn't weekend stuff, it was every day, but you were doing it to the point where you were completely self-sabotaging all your behaviors. And frankly, you were, let's be honest, you were completely out of control, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think sort of rolling back to that kind of late teen phase where the shit had hit the fan regarding my education, and I'd stopped playing rugby at that point because I'd got a job in the kitchen, which took up my evenings and weekends. But what had happened, completely unawares to me, what had happened at that stage, late teens, is I'd started going nightclub and started drinking. So there was, all of a sudden, instead of there being sport in my life, there was a chef job. But as you've mentioned, the socializing side, which then at 18, I'm thinking, wow, yes, I'm going to grown up. I've got a car, I can go out. So there's alcohol, ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, magic mushrooms, speed, and all this stuff. At the time, I just thought it was mind expanding. This is what being a grown up is. This is what going out is. This is what being cool in the nightclubs is. Yeah. And unfortunately for me, and to a degree, yes.
That's a story though. That's a story that many people can recognize. I think most people have drunk and taken drugs. I've taken ecstasy and cocaine. I mean, most of my friends have. So this is not a taboo subject. I mean, a lot of people take substances. The problem with you is that you did it habitually well into your 20s and 30s, I guess.
Yeah, and so that was kind of my. I love the Steve Peters Chimp Paradox book. It's given me a lot of ability to understand how my mind works, and what my chimp was doing at that point was just memorizing all these things that made me feel good. And then, fortunately, I moved to Essex for 4 years and was able to put drugs down. The alcohol continued through my rugby and what have you, but the drugs. But then I got into my early 30s when the wheels really were falling off for me in a lot of areas in my life by this point. But then, of course, my chimp goes back to my teen years and thinks, oh, ecstasy was nice. Cocaine was nice. Remember magic mushrooms?
Were you bored, Andy? Were you bored without purpose? Is that why you just kept jumping into these bad behaviors? Because you had no purpose. You didn't have any set. I'm putting words into your mouth here, but a lot of it is about self-esteem, isn't it? It's about being content with yourself and having some kind of purpose. Did you ever find any of that with your marriage or anything you were doing?
I always felt that myself and my ex-wife were equal in partners in a lot of respects, other than her professional life. And she grafted for that. She absolutely grafted and deserved everything that she got from her career. But other than that, I saw each other as equals, and there was never any pressure in that respect. And so I was very settled in that. And I think the self-esteem and ego thing was very relevant for me, because I was absolutely petrified. I still to this day, social situations, when we were walking down and we saw you in the high street, I was off to meet the mayor from our recent escapades, and I was terrified. So social scenarios still do that to me. And so the reflex with that would have been a couple of pints. Have a couple of pints anyway, and you'll be fine. And so that knowledge and behavior really did stick with me. So I've got to do that without alcohol now. And that for my self-esteem and my ego still is really negative. And so I can fill with cortisol and adrenaline, and it takes a while for me to shake that. And I know it's a push-pull system with serotonin, and you can't have serotonin and cortisol at the same time. And so I'm now learning that I've got to just get out of the cortisol phase. It will pass. Everything's going to be okay. It's a scary scenario. But then ultimately, when I leave the building, my brain will just fill with serotonin. Yeah, we did it. Dopamine, great. And feel good again. So I know that it's short-lived, and I haven't got to reach for external medicine.
But that cortisol injection, that fear or flight, and that adrenaline boost, and the dopamine serotonin hit you're getting, which is what you get from all kinds of things like drugs and drink and hugging and sex, and but what is the anxiety, if you call it that cortisol fear hormone that you're getting in social situations? Obviously there's a reason for it. Have you done much work to try and understand? I mean, some people are shy, right? Some people are introverted. It may just be a biogenetical thing as opposed to you having mental health problems. So I was just wondering, what's the sort of, have you done a lot of work in understanding your biological makeup, or have you put it more down to conditioning, if you like, and just accepted it as the person you are? But now, even though you feel anxious, you don't need to recover through a stimulation to get you back to, you don't need a substance to recover from it. So you're more balanced, and life is continually a push-pull between negative and positive, the whole yin and yang scenario. So a lot of people will trigger on a negative and do something to get higher, and vice versa. And so how much is that balancing? How much of it has been due to meds? How much has it been to therapy? Or how much has it been just through experience and realization about the kind of person you are, and self-acceptance? Or have you just got there gradually over time, do you think?
I think it's very much the latter for me. I think I've done a lot to educate myself through thousands of AA meetings, NA, CA, OA, all based on the same 12-step program, but from different angles. So I learned a lot through that. I've learned a lot through podcasts, audiobooks, and self-education to a slightly higher level, a bit more sciencey since. And self-processing, what do I mean by that? It's being super aware of mood, of time frames, of surroundings, of nature nurture, and really trying to get a handle on self-awareness. And I'm trying to think of an example that I can give. Like, so as a teenager, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Now, there's a lot of different opinion on what that actually is. And do I have a dopamine or serotonin release irregularity in comparison to my peers, which does suggest that I have to do things to extreme to get the same brain chemistry? I know the answer to that. Unfortunately, I can assume that I do, because of extreme behaviors that I have exhibited and wanting to do things to extreme, whether that be consuming substances or exercise or whatever else. But have I actually done the legwork to discover exactly what my irregularities are? No, I'm just kind of rolling with them and trying to deal with them as best I can moving forward,
So I think, what would you say to people who are maybe going through a really chaotic period of not understanding why they're doing things, and what they know the wheels are falling off, but they carry on anyway, and they blame, they see themselves as a victim, they see life as pretty depressing and hopeless, so they just cover this with a mask, and they I mean, I remember when in my darkest time, I didn't know I was going through it, and it took me a few life events to realize and get some help. And the first thing I would advocate to anyone is to clean live firstly, however hard it is, not escape your pain. And then you need to get some decent therapy, and whether it's medication you end up with, or counseling or therapy, or changing your life and your mindset within that. I would suggest both. But I think the question I'm getting to is, at what point did you know the wheels had fallen off? What was the change that you undertook, and how long has it been since that healing and recovery process started?
So for me, I think the realization that things weren't going to be okay was when I had to leave my wife, ex-wife. Things had just got so toxic at home, and for us two, who'd been so loving and so much on the same page for 17 years. We got together when I was 16, married at 25, split up at 34. And so that sorry to interrupt. Do you think, I mean, I don't want to particularly talk about her. It's not fair. You can, of course, if you want, but ultimately that marriage, because it was it unhappy because of you, or was it going wrong, and therefore it was a catalyst to your poor behaviors? Because you were unhappy in yourself and your marriage. Which was causing which? we've definitely gone different ways with regards to our dopamine reward system. They'd taken me into substance abuse, and it had taken her into a job. She was a year 6 primary school teacher.
Okay.
She's now the head of that primary school. So
Brilliant.
we kind of always come to the table and say, right, I'm going to drink less, and she say, I'm going to work less, and we will bring those things to the table. And neither of us were ever able to do that. So I think we both had our own goals, and they were becoming more and more polar opposite as time went on. And so we were becoming more and more toxic. We weren't aligning. And I just kind of said,
so just that's really interesting. So on relationships, a lot of people have marriages, they get to a point where they start to stagnate, the growth people are not on the same journey. What would you say to people listening that are struggling in their relationship, where they just don't see, I've been there, you just don't see eye to eye, you feel like you're on a different planet, you want different things week to week, you want different things in the future, and ultimately it boils down to communication. So bad relationships usually are because two people are hurting because they can't communicate, they can't hear each other, they can't validate each other's feelings. And I've learned through process and talking like you have, and reading and therapy, I've learned that I'm a chronically bad listener, and I don't listen. I don't actively listen. I'm always trying to fix things, and I'm always trying to give an opinion about what I think that person should do. But ultimately, as you know, it's about just being present and listening to somebody. And things like boundaries and flags and all these healthy feelings in a relationship about listening to somebody's needs, which at the time in a bad relationship, of course, you're not even aware of, because the ego takes over. It's more about point scoring. It's about blaming you because you did this, and it's about you never taking responsibility for yourself. And once you become more self-aware, you say, what can I do better, Ed? Andy, what can I do better? It's not about that kind of at each other's throats, because you don't have the self-awareness to accept that you're responsible, I think, for half of that story. And most people who are in poor relationships, a lot of them can be resolved with the right level of communication and understanding, and getting to a point where the trust is there, the healing is recovered, and that relationship can become what you set out to be. But of course, most people don't have skills to really go through a process of healing a relationship and rebuilding it. And I guess the question here is, fine, the marriage ends, they do, and it sounds like it was the right thing. Talk me so you're saying that once the marriage ended, things started to improve, that you had it's like you'd burst a balloon and the pressure sort of started to remove itself with regard to the marriage. You were still, at what point did you identify the drink and drugs as being another problem, or did it run in parallel, i.e. the marriage ended, you wanted to stop self-sabotaging?
Yeah, so I then had moved out, and it was a green light. You're right, the pressure for me not to consume drugs and alcohol then was completely lifted. A bit of separation from the person that I was arguing with the most was great, and so I could drink what I wanted with who I wanted to the extent that I wanted.
So did you go out and go on loads? Did you start partying again, uninhibited?
Yeah. So I was then living in Eccleshall, which is a small village outside where we lived, and it was the village that my other half grew up in. So she's got a lot of ties to that village, and reports of my behaviour were getting back to her. Like, I was just helping myself behind the bar and all sorts of stuff. And
so you saw this as an open door, as a green flag. You'd separated, put each other out of the unhappiness to just go out and be free, which involved getting smashed as much as possible, and dating and doing whatever single guys do in Eccleshall, right? Just to go nuts. I'm free. I can do what I want to do.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And then I had the sit down from my word. Had got back to my mum and dad basically about what my behaviour had accrued to, and they made the decision to send me to a residential rehab. And I had the whole intervention, and they sat me down, and we think you should go here. And no, I don't. It's the classic Amy Winehouse. They say I've got to go to rehab, and I said no. Everybody says that because I'm just a bloke with a few issues in my 30s who likes a pint. Like, Can you pinpoint
one or two things that happened, if you don't mind, that that they intervened? I mean, obviously care is one thing, you know, they care about you. There must have been some stuff that was going on that alarmed people for there to be an intervention, which I believe is where they get the authorities involved.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a private rehab, and so they just basically had him on the phone for the duration of the conversation. And so yeah, it was just because I'd started acting out to such a degree, and had my ego was running riot. Like, you know, it was, I deserve this, I can do this, this is going to make me feel better, this is what I use, you use what you use, but this is me. And almost without any thought for anybody else at all, I was just completely self-consumed and drunk every day. And
really, so yeah, go to work, hit the pub afterwards, kind of vibe.
Yeah,
right?
I was working on a building site, and by 5 o'clock, the clock, I'd just be on the way to the pub, and I'd tactical drinking. So I'd park on the edge of the village, walk to the high street, 12 pints, walk back to my car and drive home. And then it was Charlie every other day. And the Saturdays I was working in the kitchen, I'd get through to 10 till 2 was the first shift. I'd get through the first shift, go next door, pint, another pub, pint, another pub, pint, back in the pub I'm working in, a pint behind the bar. Then we'd have a large gin and tonic as a team at the start of the shift, a free pint after the shift, go up to the other bar where my mate was working, another free pint there. And then I'd drive back to the village and start drinking because I had Sunday off. And so then I was doing a 15-mile round trip after 10 pints to go and see my man to get cocaine. And my headlights weren't working in my car. And you know, the whole one-eyed texting, yeah, one-eyed driving. And so that's the behavior.
My God.
That's how much I was
acting out.
Yeah. And so
I mean, the reality is you could have killed yourself or somebody else and ended up dead or in prison.
Many times. And so I think once, I mean, there's
a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with those behaviors. You know what I mean?
Incredibly so. And I think then that's where early recovery is just so important, that everything is done in the right order. And AA is beautiful. It is what it is. The program. Sorry to interrupt. So basically, you got to a point where your parents intervened. You went to some rehab. For how long, and what were the next steps from that? Okay, so it's a 28-day program, but I only managed 3 weeks. I was just going mad in there, and I was finding the pressure of just a fishbowl environment where you're just constantly being watched, and you're in with 16 other people, and you're going through their problems as well, because every session is group, and so you're constantly exposed to other people who are exhibiting similar behavior to a similar degree, and how they've got there. So it's kind of constantly reaffirming why you're behaving how you're behaving, which is genius, really. It teaches you a little bit of empathy whilst you're there as well. And I couldn't handle that. I was finding that side of things harder than not having a drink. For me, the drink cravings had completely reduced.
Just go into that a little bit. What were you finding so difficult?
So
being with yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Being with myself, I mean, I'm not an emotional guy, and that's not a macho thing. I very seldom get emotional, and I was emotional all the time. Like, obviously there's a whole withdrawal period of actually coming off that quantity of alcohol is difficult enough. And then the reflection of how you've been acting and what you've caused, and the other people around you are going through the same thing. So it's just a very difficult place to reside when you're going through all of that without your medicine anymore, you know. And it's a tough.
So you're off meds. You were off everything. You were completely clean.
Completely clean.
Your withdrawal must have been ridiculously difficult, though, to come off all those medications.
Yeah, I mean, Ritalin.
So what do you advise people then who are? I mean, a couple of questions on this before we move on to the positive stuff. I mean, how do you know if you're an alcoholic? How do you know if you need to go to rehab and need help? And ultimately, you know, a lot of people do stuff that's sabotaging themselves, but at what point do you make a change? Like, not everybody needs to wait until the wheels fall off and you have a divorce or a car crash, or, you know, I take the view that if you're doing something repetitively that is causing you guilt and shame and making, you know, ultimately, you know, bad diet, substance abuse, poor behaviors, you know, lying, stealing, cheating, all these kind of bad behaviors will catch up with you, just like drink and drugs will. So obviously cut this stuff out, right? That's the first thing you would say to people. That's all very well and good saying to people, do this. If you're addicted to stuff, you can't do that. That's half the problem, right? You know, it's logical that the come downs from cocaine and booze are horrific. I've had enough of them. So me telling you and saying, Andy, you should give them up, in the mindset of an addict or someone who's depressed, it's just not feasible, because your brain is not thinking logically like that. So if you're talking to someone who's struggling, having gone through rehab and left rehab, what would you say about when do you need to get help, is the blunt question.
So I think for me personally, my opinion is that if it's costing you more than money, and the definition of addiction that I like to work with is if you're unable to stop consuming a substance or exhibiting a behavior despite negative consequences to you or others. And if that's the case, and I think people have to want to stop. That's first and foremost. They have to be ready. They have to want it, and they have to recognize it. Like for me, the number of times I wanted to do a dry month or a clean month, or I'm not going to do anything till this day, I'm going to go to my birthday without this, or dry January, whatever. And for me, I'd get like 2 or 3 days in and think, that'll do.
Yeah. Okay.
That
I've done 3 days. It's Wednesday.
Yeah. And so that constant, I mean,
it's not funny. I'm not laughing. It's an incredibly traumatic, sad place to be. I'm just
totally
trying to find it.
They do say that addiction is the disease that tells you haven't got it. And I firmly believe that. And I think I was very fortunate in that I had a loving family that rallied around me and said, Andrew, you need help. And I kind
of... ever, I'll pull no punches here. Did you consider killing yourself at times?
Oh, daily suicidal thoughts. I didn't do anything about any of them, ever. I never made an attempt on my life. But that's the place where I got to. And I thought that was because of my life and the whole concept of blame and just horrendously low self-esteem. And why do
you think if your parents, again, you don't have to answer any of this, if your parents hadn't intervened, where do you think you'd be now? Dead.
I mean, addiction's a one-way street. And until you get out of that street, that's the only way you're going to go, because of the whole tolerance thing, because of, for me.
But was there something that happened to you that made you decide to go down that clean route? What was it? The love of your parents? Was it a relationship? Was it a friend? Were you sick and tired of being in pain, do you think? I mean,
that's what it was. I had enough of of just being, they call it, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just couldn't get out of first gear in any area of my life. And I knew that alcohol was bad for me. I knew I was drinking too much, and enough was enough. I had reached the point where enough was enough. And I love people to know that help is out there. I love it that I can share the message that if they have reached that point, then there is help, and it absolutely works 100%. But as I mentioned,
so where would you recommend if people are struggling like you were? Is it GP, AA, Samaritans, mental health charities? Absorb yourself in help, seek help, get help, cry out for support. If you don't have parents, if you're on your own in your mind, you know, I mean, you're a very outgoing guy, right? Often the most outgoing, fun-loving people are the ones struggling the most. And the amount of people that kill themselves and ruin their lives, you would look at them and go, you've got everything, you know, good-looking guy, you know, reasonably, you know, good job, great set of friends, all this, you know, people, and it's inside, it's the inner turmoil. So it's those people that find it really hard to reach out and say, I'm failing, I'm struggling, I need some help. And it's got to, wherever you get the help, whether it is AA or a rehab type clinic, or regardless of the love that you've got around you or not, Andy, Ed, whoever is listening to this, you have got to pick the phone up. You have got to go and see your GP. You've got to tell everybody, I need some help, and I think I'm an alcoholic, or I'm struggling. And that realization is so difficult for people to get to, especially when you're in the depressed and you've got mental health problems as well, and whatever, because you can't unravel yourself and unpack yourself and heal yourself until you've accepted that you're broken. And that's once it comes, it's like opening a door, and the growth is just enormous. Once you get to that point, the problem and unfortunate thing is a lot of people struggle to open that door a little bit, and they either end up, unfortunately, getting worse and homeless, or completely drug addicted, and they die through suicide or through overdose, and or basically ruin their lives. So for me, when I talk to people, it's that. And from the positive side, you are a perfect walking example of the ability to open the door because you want to for yourself. And since then, your life has been quite incredible, I think. I mean, without its ups and downs, of course, or with its ups and downs. So I congratulate you on that, dude. And your open messaging is going to help people, and that's why I'm talking to you. So let's let's talk about what's happened since you got clean. And particularly want to hear about this year, which is actually a really inspiring story to anybody that's come across you in Staffordshire. So, yeah. So you got clean. That's an ongoing. How long have you been sober now?
So I haven't had a drink for 7.5 years, and alcohol was by far my primary. So I haven't drunk since rehab. However, I have had magic mushrooms, and I have had cocaine, unfortunately. It pains me to say it, but I have had an average of once a year. So I've had coke 3 times, 4 times. So a narcotic relapse 4 times. My sponsor calls it dancing with the devil, but I'm beyond proud of 7.5 years without a drink.
Yeah, I'm proud of you too, mate. And listen,
mate,
I think it takes a lot of nuts to admit that you've fallen off, and you've taken drugs, but actually growth is not a straight linear path. It's bumpy, it's horrible, it's messy. And, as long as you don't potentially get into a kind of, it's okay, because then it'll be once every quarter, once a month, once a week. Oh, it's fine. I can take cocaine, but I'm not drinking. Right. So it's like you're justifying one positive to offset a negative, and actually drugs and booze don't work like that. But also, I don't think beating yourself up over mistakes is also fair. And I think as long as you're not hiding it, as long as you're honest about it to people, to yourself and people that you love, then actually, I would never say to an alcoholic, oh, it's okay to have a drink at Christmas, because alcoholics don't, the fact is, from what I know of alcoholism, it's not just one drink at Christmas. It then starts the whole process going again. So, for me, I can pick up drinking for months and have a drink and then stop. That's not how addiction works. So I'm not qualified to make comment on what people should do, but I also don't believe that people should crucify themselves every time they fall off the wagon, whether it's sugar or drink or drugs or spliff. And it's not as simple as just saying yes or no for a lot of people. It's a very complex relationship with how you feel at the time, and ultimately, as you say, it's your choice. And I would always advocate it's about personal responsibility. You make certain choices in life, you will reap the rewards or the downside of making poor choices and good choices. And you and I have to be responsible for all of those in life, as everybody does.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me,
we want a society where people do whatever they want, and they blame. We can't keep blaming external forces for everything. At some point, it boils down to individual personality and behaviors and responsibility. And if you choose to come off the wagon, that's your choice, and where it will take you. So just like having taken cocaine 4 times in 7 years, I'm pretty sure you felt pretty horrific for several weeks afterwards, and you probably hated yourself. At the time, I imagine you had a bloody good night. But, these conversations start with transparency, right? They don't start with saying yes or no, good or bad, because life is not like that.
I completely agree. And there was the guilt factor. And I remember what hangovers are like, you know, and kind of all the remembering of all of that, and just being taken straight back. And so there was never consistent using since rehab. And I think the other thing that I would like to mention about that as well is not that it's an excuse, but I think it certainly helped me to not want more when I had a day of it. Is I'm in a massively different place now. It's not worth the gamble of alcohol. In absolutely no way will I ever want to drink again. But I just have I had such a chronic disconnection at the time. Like I was just isolating from everything. Like I was pushing everything away. Like the TED Talks about the rats, and I was just completely isolated and disconnected. Whereas now I'm not. I'm in another massively loving relationship. I've got a fantastic relationship with my parents again. And yes, I did have a relapse, and I know this is going to also sound like a permission and spoken like a true addict, but it was good time using. I wasn't doing it to escape. I was doing it. One of the times I was on my 40th birthday, and there was a crowd of lads here, and I had a little bit, you know, and it turned out fine. And but I do put a lot of it down to the connection that I've got with life and the
Gosh, that's so important. It's so important to make those points, that how you are individually underneath your external social behavior, right? Whether it's, you know, with other people, how you feel about your life and yourself, that self-esteem, that confidence that you're not going to fall again. You know, I do think there's a lot of high-performing drug and drink users. The whole of this country is full of people that drink too much, who get up on a Monday morning and perform exceptionally highly. There's many stories of chief executives of companies drinking and taking drugs. So it's not like suicide. This is not a dirty word. You know, drug use is not something, you know, that we think about people living on the streets putting needles in their arms. This is a modern day usage of a substance, and alcohol has been around for centuries. And addiction is one of those things where I think everyone thinks, well, I'm not an addict. And, you know, and it boils down to what is the state of mind of the individual beneath the substance, because as an upper and a downer, they're both horrific things to take. And it's clearly going to put someone off the rails who's in an emotional state of overwhelm and distress. And I think what you said is very clear, that you are in a much different place. And whilst you're not giving yourself permission to go out and take drugs irresponsibly and drink irresponsibly, we have to have the debate about two substances that are incredibly widely used in society. Drug use is not something, you know, that we think about people living on the streets putting needles in their arms. This is a modern day usage of a substance, and alcohol has been around for centuries. And addiction is one of those things where I think everyone thinks, well, I'm not an addict. And, you know, and it boils down to what is the state of mind of the individual beneath the substance, because as an upper and a downer, they're both horrific things to take. And it's clearly going to put someone off the rails who's in an emotional state of overwhelm and distress. And I think what you said is very clear, that you are in a much different place. And whilst you're not giving yourself permission to go out and take drugs irresponsibly and drink irresponsibly, we have to have the debate about two substances that are incredibly widely used in society. And I'm not advocating to anybody. I think the issue is if you're unhappy, if you're feeling malcontent, if you're hurting other people, if you're, as you said, it's costing you more than money, there is a change that you need to make. And it's not AA or nothing. You know, there is people that feel that they're sabotaging in many different ways, whether it's porn addiction or gambling or drink or drugs. You know when it's hurting you and it's hurting other people. You can just tell you feel unhappy. And that unhappiness is really making strides to heal yourself through therapy, through abstinence, if that's what it takes, through better living, through learning about, you know, what the kind of things, the skills that you need to have, communication skills, you know, the things that people who are self-aware do. They listen more, they learn more, they regulate more, they change their social circles, you know, they do things that are productive for them to change their life. They develop purpose. You know, they care more about other people than themselves. These kind of lifestyle changes, it's not a question of I'm an addict, therefore da da da. The whole thing is wrapped up in my mind about, you know, one is cause and effect. You know, you're happy generally. It's okay to be unhappy in a few small areas of your life. And I think that's where what you're saying is, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people, that having a drink the odd line is what most people in this country do. That's the facts. They're the statistics. So I think we've recognized, for anyone watching this, that you know when it's time to sort out your problems. And it's a very complex situation, which I think starts with the GP and starts with therapy, but it starts with telling people you've got a problem. That's where you have to start. And I think, it's just to finish, I mean, you admitting that you're not completely clean is going to help people acknowledge that they don't need to lie about it, because secrets make you sick, and lying about addiction and mental health is the worst thing for anybody, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think you're as sick as your secrets. And you're right. I think the whole lifestyle change thing it's scary, but I think change is scary in a lot of respects. But when it's something to the magnitude of putting down the one thing that you think is keeping you happy, which for me was alcohol, that was it's a massive step. And you're right. People have to. There's this argument of rock bottoms, and I think some people say, well, I got to this point, that's what made this behavior was exhibited, this thing happened to me, and that was enough for me, I stopped there. That's great. But for other people, I think rock bottom is when you stop digging, and that's kind of what happened to me. Yes, the losing my ex-wife was a massive emotional trauma for me, but I don't think it was at the time, because I was completely masking it with the use of alcohol. And so I do believe that my rock bottom was when I stopped digging, and I was prepared and ready. It's like, yeah, please just take me. I have had enough of this. Let's change. Let's move on.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that there is this whole element of being completely accepting of having to change to be a healthier individual to the best of my ability. And that, you're right, it included, like in the early days, I just had to completely simplify. Like, stop spinning all the plates. The only plate that I had to spin for about the first 3 months was don't have a drink. And that's all it was. It's like, just keep that one plate fucking spinning through fear of God, right? And it was anything but booze, you know, it was 4 pizzas, it was 3 tubs of ice cream, it was bags of Haribo, it was walks in nature, it was reconnecting, it was the fellowship of AA, 90 meetings in 90 days, it was everything that was suggested to me, you know, get a sponsor, read the book, start working the steps. And I did it, and I couldn't be ready for it, and I wanted it. And
amazing.
And I think moving forward, and the fog clears. It cleared for me in 3 months. It cleared for me again at 18 months. And fairly recently, about 5 years in, everything just got that little bit easier again. And I think at these points, and I've done a lot of self-education, like I've mentioned, through AA, and I learned a lot through AA, but also through wanting to educate myself, the whole concept that life starts at 40. I am screaming for education now. I just want to know stuff. And a lot of
brilliant.
It comes down to health.
I love it.
Psychology and brain chemistry and sport and fitness and well-being and nutrition. And
so look, let's get. I love this conversation. Let's get on to what's happened this year. You've done. Tell people what you've done. I mean, I'll put it in the intro, right? People will know what you've achieved. Why did you decide to do it at that point in your life? And then I want to talk about the journey of doing it, and I want to talk about what you've learned from doing it, and then you can talk about what's next. But you don't have to answer them in that order. But basically, Andy's is now a world record holder and has done 70 in 90 days, was it, or 80 days? I'm not sure how. You had a small break at the end due to a broken leg or something. But tell me about why. To start with,
I had got to about 4.5, 5 years of sobriety, and I was ready. I just felt healthy enough. I people around me were kind of spurring me on, like, right, okay, let's kind of move on. Let's get this career thing going. Because for me, the real thing that was hanging over my head was I'd never fulfilled myself in the professional arena. I just hadn't. And it was a real tick in the box that I needed, and got all motivated. It's like, right, okay, this is it. And so
why that though? Why that not, why not 7 endurance marathons in a week? I mean, why that?
I don't know. I think it's because it had come from I just felt a feeling of lack of fulfilling potential. And I used to call myself Andy Minimum Wage Stone, and I just felt like I had a lot of potential to have a career and have a decent job and earn money and not be financially dependent on my parents in my 30s. And because they paid for rehab for me, and so I was ready. And so then moved abroad, moved to the Philippines, got trained. I spent 6 months training as a scuba instructor. I then spent a further year in the Philippines, moving around, doing a bit of a journeyman, assisting, teaching, and getting a real sort of handle on being a professional dive instructor. And that's
brilliant.
Oh my God, it was incredible. I love marine biology, specifically reefs. I just find them fascinating. And I allowed it to consume me. I dedicated myself to my new career, which is what I wanted so bad. The rest of my behavior throughout the day was in order to make me better at my job. And I was completely at peace with that. Whereas previously, it's like, as soon as the bell went at 5 o'clock, fuck you, I'm off. I'll see you at 10 o'clock hungover. Do you know what I mean? And so to have that was a revelation. I finished in the Philippines. I then got offered a job in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean, which was a dream job. It was like going
as a diving instructor. What level are you at now in Paddy?
So I'm an instructor, so I can train anyone up to dive master. I was an emergency first responder, so I can train rescue divers. I can train 4-day first aid.
How many dives have you done now?
It's over 500, but
wow.
The job in
Love it. I mean, I do some scuba diving, and we've talked about this. And in fact, I mean, I did my. Go on.
No, I was going to say, so when you drop through the water, it's complete escape. It's the best. For the next hour of your life, all you've got to worry about is not running out of air. And what amazing stuff that you can see. I mean, scuba ain't a spectator. But when you're the one doing it, it's incredible.
But you've also got to worry about the people you're looking after as well. That would help.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You still have to find them up before they get in.
Especially the Japanese guys at the back.
So I'd gone off to the Caribbean. I was working for a big American company in Little Cayman. It's very affluent, and you have to be on point.
Excuse me.
Very professional job, and I was asked to go into the manager's office a couple of times because I'm fresh out of the Philippines, where you can take the piss a little bit. Not in Little Cayman, you can't. So I found a job that was going to take a bit of a greenie and turn me into like a 40-foot boat captain, and continues to develop my diving and blah blah blah. So I'd be a resort dive professional. And then COVID struck, and so I was only actually working there for a month. They let us stay on island for a couple of months and saying, look, COVID's going to pass, you're on a visa.
Where's Little Cayman?
So it's about 150 miles west of Jamaica.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and so we were just on island dossing. All the guests were sent home because we were on visas. We could stay for COVID. And then 2 months in, they were like, "Look, this ain't going anywhere. You've got to go home." So British Airways repatriated us, and I then landed back in Stafford, the town I've been screaming to get away from, with no work. And it was like, holy shit! And when
was this? Like, this is what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, so this is second lockdown where it was through winter, and we went on a few dates and it went really well. And over that following summer, I moved in, and she's got 2 kids. But by this point, because of COVID, kids hadn't been in school for 9 months. And there were two sibling brothers that were like 8 and 6 at the time. And oh my God. So I'm living in a house. But bear in mind, I haven't got kids. I've never wanted kids. Two brothers that were pulling each other's hair out.
Brilliant.
And I'm like, holy shit, I swear to God, I was meant to be fucking living the rest of my life on the Caribbean beach somewhere. What is going on?
Yeah, man, gosh, what a repatriation that is. Wow.
I then nearly I had given myself permission. I was that wound up and that I was getting disconnected because I was pushing them all away because I just didn't want to know. And Sally, my now partner, is a gin producer. She works with the biggest distillery in the UK. She's an account manager for supermarkets. There's gin flipping everywhere. All her prize bottles that she's produced on the shelves around the house. And I gave myself permission for a drink. And I stood up off the sofa in the lounge, came into the kitchen to the cupboard to get a bottle of gin. And I put it down and changed my mind. I was like, that is too close. Sally, sit down. We've got to have a talk. And as a part of my sort of personal development, I had started studying all these guys doing these super endurance races like James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, David Goggins, Ross Edgley, all these guys that I'd been listening to.
We all know Goggins. Stay hard.
Incredible, right? And so I just thought, I want to know what that feels like. And so iron distance, the full iron is 140.6 miles. These companies also run a half distance, which is 70.3, obviously, which is 0.2 mile swim, a 56-mile ride, and then a half marathon, which is a 70.3 miles.
Amazing.
I decided with Sally, we pulled it out of the air and said, right, I'm going to do 70 of them in 70 days. And she said, yeah, you are. So immediately Sally was on board, and which is priceless. And so that was then the gym started opening. It was the coldest flipping winter ever, I think. Well, it's pretty cold.
When did you start? In April, was it?
Yeah. No. So I started in April of this year, April 4th. And I did 17, 17, 17, which is sprint distance. I did 35, 35, 35, which is Olympic distance last year. Trained all the way through the winter. I was doing like 28-hour training weeks all through the winter. Really super focused. Nutrition was on point. Wasn't missing many sessions. Yoga, weights, swim, ride, run, the lot. And
you had quite a lot of personal coaching support. You had dietary support, nutrition support. So you did this as a professional project, pretty much, from what I saw of it. So and you were completely committed until you finished it. But I mean, I've done a number being 2 or 3 Olympic. I've done plenty of sprints and half triathlons and a couple of half Ironman, which I think is the Olympic distance. It took me a week to recover from one. So what kind of level of fitness and resilience do you have to get to do 5 in a row, let alone 70? Because you are literally breaking your body down and building it up again every day. How do you recover from that to go again?
It's a good question. 18 months, 2 years now, 18 months before I started, I struggled to run a 10K. I've got a mate who lives over the road, and we went, right, okay, let's go out for a run. During lockdown, we did. And I struggled to keep up with him. And it wasn't quick. It was like 9-10 minute miles. I just
because you're not your body shape. You're not a natural triathlon body shape, are you?
No.
You're a big guy.
Yeah, I'm 6'1", 95 kilos. So I was a rugby did well at rugby. So I'm that kind of build. So I was never going to be quick at triathlon.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I did what I could over the 18 months. I had a physio, an ex-professional rugby player physio who had a lot of input, who was great. My program writer, he podiumed on the World Duathlon Championship. I had a lady who got in touch, Rosie Mead, who just finished a PhD and is now going off to help athletes. She's called the Aligned Athlete, and her opinion is that if everything else in your life is completely aligned, then the training becomes loads easier. So let's get your life aligned. Let's get you your habitual stuff. Let's get you meditating again. Let's get you sorting out what your daily routines are. Let's get you comfortable and
so is it right to say that to undergo a project of this size, I mean, obviously there's a lot of mental resilience as well, but it's about being organized. It's about having structure and being disciplined, I imagine, to take on anything like this.
Yeah, so when you see interviews with Olympians, like, I'm not pretending to be at Olympian level at all. I'm not. But however, having had a taste of because I wasn't able to work. I wasn't able to have a job at the same time as my training. I was beyond tired a lot of the time on the 12-month build up to the start line. And there was a lot of physical conditioning went into that. But yeah, I think that having had a taste of that, when you see the interviews with these guys and they just say it's complete dedication and commitment and sacrifice, and you don't see your mates and you don't do this and you don't do that, you are.
So let's get. So you are doing it. Why? What kept you going right through the training, through the project? What is it deep inside you that wanted? Is it because you wanted affirmation, accolades, acknowledgement? You wanted to prove to yourself that you could achieve something amazing, right?
I think it's all of those things. I think it was, to a certain degree, anything that you could probably think of that might motivate someone. I think I tasted a little bit of all of it, to be honest. I think there was
amazing.
The myself. There was the having to achieve something significant and feel like a fulfilled potential. And
gosh, how important is that? What a big statement.
I felt like
because we're all looking to fulfill some potential. We're all looking for affirmation. We're looking to be recognized. Every human being walking on the planet wants somebody to say, "Well done." You know, feel proud of yourself.
Yeah.
So, sorry, carry on. You're in the middle of it.
Yeah. So I feel like I've tested my body in a negative way. I think 12 pints of Stella and Coke every other day for years, it was a test of what the human body can actually tolerate. And so seeing these guys like Goggins is running 240-mile runs over off-road terrain, climbing 40,000 feet. And you just think, that's insane. And then the Iron Cowboy did full distance irons for 101 days.
Yeah. I know he gave you a shout out, didn't he? I think on your socials.
He did, bless him. Yeah. So I had to be proud of him. But yeah, so I was
amazing.
So that's what my body can tolerate in a negative way. That's what other people are achieving. How about let's actually find out what I can do? Because I can tell you, grinding through alcohol addiction and early recovery is no joke. And so I thought, right, okay, well, I've had a little bit of preparation for some of this shit that's going to be thrown at me psychologically. Physically, I've always been drawn to sport, and it's always been something that has given me good dopamine and serotonin and adrenaline and all these wonderful feelings that I have always craved. And I've always been a physical guy. It's always stood me in good stead. And I thought, right, that's
it's an incredible achievement, absolutely incredible, from someone that's done some triathlons, mate. I think anyone that's gotten up at 5 o'clock in the morning went to do run, bike, swim every day or every other day for like 18 months, and then to do it every day when you saw, when your toe fell off, your nail fell off, you had some horrific injuries, but it's just, I was watching you doing it, and I think everybody that observed it just thought the resilience and determination. I know plenty of Olympic athletes that couldn't have done that. I know plenty of incredibly fit professional sports people that physically couldn't have done it and mentally couldn't have done it. So what you've achieved is beyond 7 marathons in 7 days. It is heartwarming and inspiring to a lot of people that are normal everyday Joe, no disrespect, can turn their life around from a car crash to having something you can spend the rest of your life talking about. But actually, I know that's not but your aims now, I mean, you did it, and congratulations. Your aims now are to spread the message of hope and inspiration from doing it. But what's next for you? But before we get onto that and we wrap up, I want to get to the real, the emotions and the feelings, what you learned about yourself over the last 2 years. And I want you to be as honest as possible. The darkest moments of getting in that cold swimming pool at 6:30 in the morning when you're exhausted and you're on that cortisol, downer. And what have you learned about yourself in the last 2 years?
So I think the first and
And
foremost,
take a moment to think about it if you want, because it's important, I think, to be as honest as you can be for everyone.
yeah, I think first of all, you've got to want it. Same as I wanted to stop drinking and get through addiction, I wanted to achieve the 70 and 70 days. That's, first of all, you've got to want it, because without want, you'll stop and you'll revert back to type. I think what I've learned from myself about myself over the last 2 years. So this is kind of when I'm out in the open and out of the fog of recovery and actually really trying to strive and not accepting okay and just striving past that and really wanting to succeed. I think it's similar demons, if I'm honest. You kind of, it's, as I've kind of go back to the Chimp Paradox books, Professor Steve Peters' book, and the human brain and the chimp brain, or the ego and the self, or the good conscience and the bad conscience. I think that every human being has that, and I think for me, the as I mentioned, the chimp wants me sat on a sofa, drinking beer, watching a box set, eating pizza and ice cream. That's where my chimp wants me, and every time I stray from that to any degree, he's squawking in my ear, going, no, we're not going to do that today. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to. And so, but that's the essence of resilience for me. The essence of mental resilience boiled down is beating your chimp. And that's all it is. Like, I do it in the back garden now. I've got a 300-litre water butt with frozen water in it, and I get in it. And my chimp is going, what are you doing? We are not getting in there. We're not getting, we are getting in there. And you can beat your chimp. Get out, get out, get out, get out. And that's my chimp voice. And my humans go, no. And I can go into a meditative state. My heartbeat goes down to about 48 beats per minute. And so for me, what I've learned is that chimp is always there. Throughout my addiction recovery, throughout the 70s, just stop, Andy. Just stop. Just stop. We'll have an extra hour between the ride and run today. We'll. And he's constantly wriggling through my head, trying to find a way out of doing everything that he doesn't want to do. And he's always there. And so for me now, it's making peace with that. It's being calm about it, knowing that I'm not going to want to do things that I've got to do, but being able to move on and do them. And that has been a major stepping stone for me, is understanding that the chimp can be beaten. And also, I think the more time goes on, the healthier I want to be as an individual in all areas. And I know it's a bit of a cliche of living your best life and all of that, but
not at all. Not at all.
I think you get one go on the merry-go-round. And I want my body to be fully functional, and I want my mind to be fully functional. And I know there's going to be, we're just a bag of chemicals at the end of the day. So I know that walking into a bar with a few people that I kind of know is going to be incredibly difficult, probably for the rest of my life. So I'm just accepting of that, and I can sit with it. It's like when I was dating.
But I think that's a good point, because, there is such a social pressure with loneliness, and people go to bars with their friends. That's how the British socialize. And it takes a lot of resilience to say no and live a life where people, with a different set of people, yes, you're in a relationship, but it's really hard in the UK to stand out on your own and not be that person that goes to the pub and has 6 pints, because it's so easy to do it.
Yeah, but then by choosing another life, by choosing another way, I've got a Guinness World Record.
I know, man. And I just think and I cannot wait. And I love what you said there about the chimp. And I've read that book, and I think, I would also volunteer this to you, that 15 years of living the life that you did, the pain and the overwhelm and the chaos that you lived in has given you so much fuel to counter that with stuff that you're genuinely proud of, because you're sick and tired of not being someone that is worthy of listening to. And therefore now all you want to do is stuff that makes people go, that's really impressive. I want some of that. and you're inspiring people, right? Not through being, a rocket science, or or a typical normal way of getting a job and a career, but you're actually doing things that are inspiring in their own right. And I think that is worthy. Now you've got to obviously make a living out of it somehow. That's the other challenge. But I mean, to sum up, I think, what do you think? I mean, I've just proposed something to you. I should probably let you respond to it. In terms of fuel, like in terms of fueling your ambition, I think it's like, I believe firmly in yin and yang. Like every reaction has an opposite and equal reaction, or every action has an opposite equal action. So to have that level of dissent, you've got to have if you believe in zero sums, you've got to have a balancing force. And the fact is, now you're on a trajectory of growth. Before, you were on a dissension of destroying Andy Stone. And now you've actually found yourself, and you're getting high, inverted commas, off being a different person. You're finding who the real you is, which actually you had no idea who was. So you buried yourself. I love that phrase you used about, stop digging, and then you I forget exactly what you said. Rock bottoms when you stop digging.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful phrase. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you believe it's a trajectory of down and up?
I definitely think so. I am a big believer in the yin yang thing as well, and I think you're right. And I think even now, yes, on the bigger picture of the addiction phase, recovery phase, wellness phase, I think there is that bigger picture stuff when you step back. But even just in the nuts and bolts, I believe in yin yang. Like, even down to things like cortisol and serotonin, you can't have them both. But then you're going to it's going to come back. You will get that cortisol hit, and you are going to feel shit, because there was the aftermath of the 70s. I did not give enough planning to at all. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to feel shit afterwards." Thanks. That's all the input you've got. Thanks for your opinion. I will be braced.
It's very Staffordshire, that is. You're going to be sore after this.
You're gonna feel shit, mate. Yeah, great, thank you. But lo and behold, I really did, and I've now done the research into why, and I know why. I know exactly why there was no serotonin in my brain, because I wasn't exercising, and the tolerance that I required for me to get the sufficient serotonin in my brain from exercise was a half iron distance triathlon, of which I'm never doing another one of those for the rest of my life. Yeah. And actually, I probably needed a little bit more than that, because that's where my tolerance was. So I'd have probably had to have done 3/4 of a full Ironman to get any kind of serotonin release in my brain sufficient for me to be content. And that was on a daily basis. And so it's now being able to see that and go, okay, Sal, I'm going to feel shit for about a month. Okay, do not take this personally. I am going to do what I can. I'm not going to be an arsehole and a dick. I still love you. We are still going to be in the same house. Plus, give me a little bit of distance from the kids for a few days. But we were able to talk about this, and I've been nothing but honest with Sal. Everything is on the table with Sally. Yeah. And so the connection I've got with my significant other is massive. And so yes,
because you're comfortable enough. What I'm hearing here, you're comfortable enough to be completely honest. And what I love about this conversation is that you're not hiding anything. You're not hiding stuff. People might, you like the comment you just made about the kids. I don't want to be around the kids for a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, and it's totally fine. Say things. We're all so pressurized into, oh, you shouldn't say that. And I think happiness, it definitely helps if you're able, with your other half, just to be completely transparent. And she sounds like a great woman, and you've got
she's incredible.
So what's next? We better wrap up, because I'm sure we're into an hour and 15 minutes. But anyway, it's good. It's all great conversation. So I think people have got a flavour of what you've been up to, where you're from. What's next for you? How do people find you? What do you want to achieve in life? I know you're doing some jiu-jitsu now. Is that right?
Yeah, so I just swapped it up completely. It kind of happened with rugby as well, as I've played rugby to death and done triathlon to death, and so I just needed something completely new. And so getting into jiu-jitsu, you put a white belt on, and it's humbling.
Tom Hardy's doing it, right? Tom Hardy's doing it, so it can't be all that bad.
He's up to blue or purple belt now. I think he's doing really well. So trying that. I'm now making inroads into becoming a professional speaker. So starting with hopefully school, sixth formers, colleges, maybe some unis, ultimately wanting to get into business where it's a bit more lucrative, but
sure.
To start
speaking, and you want to do adventuring, exploring kind of stuff and more endurance stuff?
Yeah,
not so much.
We have got something on the horizon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's end it there. But where can people find you? You're on social media or website?
Yeah, so we're currently, the PR girls are setting me up a website at the minute, so that's not live. But at the moment, just social media. So Insta, Triathlon World Record Andy, when you can find me on there, or you can just Google Andy's triathlons, and there's a load of media links on Google.
Amazing, Andy. Amazing. Well, I could go on for hours, dude, but we're on like an hour and 15, so we better wrap it up there. But I love talking to you. I love how honest you are. I think you're a very humble, lovable guy, and I think people are right behind you, cheering you on. And thank you, mate. Thank you for sharing with such honesty and candidness. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. And I'm going to come around and dive in your tank at some point. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course it is, Jeff.
Not that one. The one in the garden, dude. Forget the fishy one.
Yeah, it's about 4 inches of ice on it at the minute. So yeah.
All right. Well, maybe at the weekend when it's 10 degrees. All right, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, mate.
All right, buddy. Take care.
You too.